Hey gang, good morning. Richard Bliss Brooke here. This morning I'm going to talk about 3 ways to tell a credible story. And here's what I mean by that. You know, a lot of us are in sales and marketing, and most effective way for us to sell and market ourselves and our products is to tell stories, right? Word of mouth is still the most potent form of advertising. When people see a video from your company, or they see a brochure from your company, or they see anything that's professionally produced, you know, their guard immediately goes up, the filter immediately goes up. This is advertising. I can't really believe all or any of this, even though I may want to. But when you and I are telling our own personal, authentic stories, people tend to believe us. Why? Word of mouth, way more effective form of advertising than anything else. So, you know, a lot of us are in the business of those word of mouth stories, telling stories about our products, telling stories about ourselves, telling stories about our opportunities. But here's the thing. When we tell stories, we got to tell believable stories, right? We got to tell credible stories, because if the people we're telling the stories to don't believe us, well, then what's the point of telling the story? It actually backfires. If they don't believe us, then they label us a liar, and our credibility plummets much further than it was before. So here's 3 tips for telling a credible, believable, and effective story. A story that people will respond to like, okay, I get that. Let me hear more, right? That's the point. That's what we're going for, is getting whoever we're telling the story to want to know more. What's the next story? What's the deeper layer? What's next for me? How do I get involved at the next level? Tell me the next story. So here's step 1 in telling a credible story. Tell a true story. How about that? How about no matter how you spin it, no matter what features and benefits, no matter the style, no matter what, if you're not telling a true story, people pick up on it. People pick up that it's just not credible. They may not know why it's not credible, but they just get that it's not credible. It's not believable. Why is it not believable? Because it's not true. And so I'm not suggesting that that's a challenge that most of you have, telling the not true stories. But boy, if you're a network marketer, or you know, you're a realtor, or you're in insurance, or you're in any kind of advertising, what is it Seth Godin says? All advertisers lie. Marketing is lying. You know, so maybe it's not you in particular, but it's certainly the broad brush of selling and marketing is lying, which is basically telling stories that aren't true. And, you know, if you look at big business, you know, look at big business in America. Look at the fines that big business incurs. I mean, it's so commonplace today that, you know, it's the new normal that, you know, Wells Fargo's fined $10 billion for fraud. You know, it's like, well, I guess that's okay. You know, pomegranate juice, you know, fined $10 million for fraud. Whatever that new brain thing is that everybody's, you know, that's advertising, you know, they've already been fined, you know, millions of dollars for fraud. Lying in marketing is commonplace, which is one of the reasons why it's not a trusted form of advertising. But word of mouth is still a trusted form of advertising. So let's not mess it up by lying. And exaggerating is lying. So any kind of puffery, any kind of exaggeration is lying. Now that's different than spin. It's different than wordsmithing. It's different than, you know, carefully choosing your words to cast a vision and use words that enroll people, that people resonate with. That's different than puffery and exaggeration. Puffery and exaggeration is just lying. It's just making your story better than it is, and not through wordsmithing, but through adding basically facts that aren't there. So, one of the things that I find in people of influence, and how do you know you're somebody of influence or not? Well, when you ask somebody to do something, do they do it? When you ask somebody for a favor, when you ask somebody to take a look at your product or your business, do they do it? If you're a person of influence, they probably do. And how did you get that influence? Well, you didn't get it overnight. You didn't get it since you probably started selling this product. You got your influence over years, perhaps decades, of how you show up for people. And if you've showed up as somebody that's not trustworthy, showed up as somebody that doesn't keep their word, showed up as a taker versus a giver, well, you don't have influence. So to stay focused on step one is tell the truth, whatever the truth is. And if the truth isn't good enough, then guess what? Whatever you're selling isn't good enough, at least not yet. Go create a better truth. So here's step two. Give details. Like when you're telling your story, if you want people to believe your story, give details. The more details you can give, the more believable the story, because people can lock in on each one of those details and ask themselves, well, does that sound true? Do I believe that detail? Does that make sense? And so that's why when I teach people to tell their network marketing story, one of the most important pieces of that story is who exactly introduced you to network marketing, and how did you know that person, and where were you when you were introduced, and what was going on in your life. And if you can remember, tell us exactly what they said that had you take a look. See, that detail is so important because it draws the listener in, and they listen to each piece of the detail and they ask themselves, does that sound believable? Does that sound true? And these things are pretty simple. Where was I when my friend that I went to high school with, introduced me to network marketing? Those are all believable details of the story. So load up your story with details, factual details, the kind of details that give your story living color. It helps people believe in your story. And the last tip to tell believable stories is pay attention to your energy. Listen to the listening. Imagine who's going to be listening to your story. Maybe it's a story that's on your social media page. Maybe it's a story that's on your website. So that's a broad audience that would be listening to your story. Maybe it's a story that you're telling one person. So what I want you to do is imagine the listening. Listen to the listening. What do I mean by listening to the listening? I mean, imagine you're the one listening to the story. Imagine that person. Who is that person? What's their style? What's their personality? What's the context of you sending the story? What's the relationship you have with that person? And imagine how they're going to listen to the story and match your energy to their energy. So here's an example. Maybe what you think is for your story to be believable, you have to scream it. You have to talk really fast. You have to scream it. You have to be really enthusiastic, and that makes your story more believable. Not to a listener who's not so enthusiastic, who's not like on the same plane as you are right now. And, maybe if you're looking to address a broad audience on social media or your web page, maybe you want to ramp it up a few notches. But if you're dealing with people one-on-one, what you want to think about is, who is this person I'm sending this to, and how are they going to hear it? And speak to the listening. That's a little neuro-linguistic programming trick, but what it allows people to do is hear you. It's like, somebody's out, got their thumb out on the road and they're hitchhiking. That's kind of an analogy of their listening. And you drive by them at 80 miles an hour and open the door. That's you not paying attention to the listening, right? If you were, you'd slow down to 2 miles an hour, roll the window down, ask them if they want to ride. If they do, stop, pick them up, then go 80 miles an hour. Does that make sense? So there's 3 tips for you for telling a credible story. Your credibility is everything in word-of-mouth marketing, because if people don't believe you, then they actually believe you're a liar. And if they believe you're a liar, your stock just plummeted far below even neutral. So you're either winning or losing by the credibility of your stories. So tell the truth. And if you don't like the truth, create a new truth. Give lots of details. Details that people can hang their hat on. Details that people can relate to. And tell the story in a way that people can hear it. Like, match up with their listing. Tell the story.